So, welcome back. Let me get this back. Okay, can't be helped. How are you doing? Good. Looking forward to another late evening, huh? By all means. So, any questions from last time? Anything left open? Anything we should briefly touch upon? So we talked about typical structure of a paper in general, of a thesis in general, and seminar being a special beast, being something not totally ordinary, very high-level text structure. We also talked about reading, how to find references, specific search engines, Google Scholar being a prevalent one, IEEE Explore, reference chasing, both forward and backward direction, gives you a long list of possible papers and how to trim this down by filtering and filtering and filtering, right? So that's currently your job. The first deadline is coming up soon. Did you already talk to your advisors? At least send them an email.
Yes.
Not yet. Why not?
I'll send to them.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Also, I didn't get anything yet, right? And I know who I'm looking at least partially. So why not? You should get in touch with your advisors and talk to them, right? General rule for seminars: talk to them, talk to them, talk to them, right? Best thing you can do. Don't exaggerate, but a little bit more contact than what I've seen so far is probably a good idea. Right, so first deadline, list of papers, right? List of papers that you think make sense. And then your advisor will either say, yes, sounds good, or maybe drop, or maybe add, or whatever, right?
Well, is that list final?
No. It's the current working hypothesis. We want to make sure that you get started early on, that you have something to work on. That's why we build these intermediate milestones, right? So to make sure something happens, some progress happens. If you drop a paper or add another one at the end, we'll see. Don't get overly excited about that, right? But do something, not nothing. Okay, so then the deadline comes with bullet points and high-level structure, headings, bullet points. Fair enough, shouldn't be too much of a problem. But then on the horizon, slowly the problem comes up that we actually want text, right? And we don't just want text, we want readable text. We want text that is nice to read, that is enjoyable to read, that is easy to process. And that's what today is all about, right? So there's one example. You guys know Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip? No? So Calvin, the boy, is a, I don't know, 8-year-old, I don't know, something like that, 8, 9-year-old little boy who has a stuffed animal, a tiger, as a stuffed animal. But he imagines the tiger, Hobbes, to be alive. So these comics are the conversation between Calvin and his imaginarily alive tiger. But he's also a very precautious and very grown-up little boy. As that. Oh, you really can't see that. Why is that? Why is that menu bar there? Okay. Well, basically he talks about his homework assignment and how he hates writing assignments. But basically he comes up with a little practice. Writing can be an intimidating and impenetrable fog. And his book report is The Dynamics of Interbreeding and Monological Imperatives in Dick and Jane, a study in psychic translational gender modes. Dick and Jane is a children's book, right? You know, Dick has a dog and the dog runs, etc. But you can turn this into a study in psychic transrelational gender modes if you just throw in enough academies at the problem. So now is your choice. Either you can decide you want to write academy style, which will be impenetrable and impossible to understand fog. Then you can leave now and have the evening off, right? Or you can stay and maybe we'll talk about how to avoid that. If you think this is great, leave now. No? Okay, good. Everybody leaves, I have an evening off, so that's fine as well. Okay, so goal here is writing text in the small. Last time we talked about text at the large, right? At large scale, big structure, chapter 2, chapter 3, etc. Now we're talking about sentences and paragraphs. I don't think we'll manage to talk about paragraphs today. That probably comes next time. We'll probably just stick to sentences for today, and then do paragraphs next time. And as I said, it's about achieving readable prose. Things that are text that is easy to read, enjoyable to read, without the reader going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, I don't want to. And actually getting something. Now, don't ask for or don't expect concrete prescriptions or recipes here. All I can try to do is make you aware of typical problems, sharpen your problem detection skills, and then maybe give you some ideas about how to reword, how to revise things. So that's the entire goal I have. Oops, sorry, wrong button. So, what I did here, basically I took one book by Joseph Williams and put this onto slides. So if you want the actual source, no, I don't see it. I don't think it's here. This is a little pocket book. It's like 10 euros. This is the best 10 euros you can spend in your entire life. Buy this, read it, put it under your pillow, and read it again the next morning. This is the best investment you can make for your entire career. Forget computer and programming, etc. This is stuff that you will need your entire life. That really helps. And almost all I'm talking about here is quoted from Williams' book. This is sort of his small textbook. He also has longer versions, etc., etc. So he has written, I don't know, a dozen or so of textbooks on the American and British colleagues would typically call that technical writing, as opposed to creative writing. Creative writing is about telling stories and writing a novel and coming up with a story and blah, blah, blah. Right here we're talking technical writing about hard stuff, right? Science, engineering, and how to turn that around. For the German-speaking guys, there's a couple of German books on that, but we'll skip that. You might know Bastian Sieg? Yeah, okay. So, let's start with an example. Let's compare two sentences. I'll read them out for you, but you should probably also read them. Here. An understanding of the causal factors involved in excessive drinking by soccer fans could lead to their more effective treatment. Makes sense? An understanding of the causal factors involved in excessive drinking by soccer fans could lead to their more effective treatment. Okay? Version 1. Version 2. We could more effectively treat soccer fans who drink excessively if we understood why they do. Oops, sorry. It's a new one, I'm not used to it yet. Same statement, right? Which one do you prefer? Sentence 1 or sentence 2? 2? 1? I heard one guy saying 1. Who was it? Why do you think sentence 1 is better?
Since if we consider that technical writing is the one which we have to consider, I guess that's more explanatory.
Is it?
No, I don't say explanatory, but
You said explanatory.
I should not say explanatory.
Okay, good. So it's not more explanatory. They explain the same things, right? The actual facts stated in both sentences are identical, as far as I can tell. So why do you think sentence 1 is better?
Instinct.
Instinct, okay? That's not a compelling argument. Okay, hey, come on, don't be shy.
Sentence 2 is directed at more, let's say, broader audience because it's a much simpler language than the first sentence.
So the first one is
More
secret
complex.
knowledge, only intended for a select few.
No. It's
No.
just a more. It's a bit. It's a more complex style of writing than the second one.
I agree.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my question. I asked which one do you prefer?
The second one conveys the idea quickly. More quickly.
Agree? Other opinions?
The formal way of writing any article.
Why?
standard should be maintained to write it.
So the second one is substandard.
I could say it's a derivative of the first one.
It's a what? It's a
Derivative.
well, you don't know which sentence was first, right? This first one could be a derivative of the second, right? We don't know. Right? They could be written independently by two different people. Or, we don't know. But you stumbled, right? You stumbled over the second one. Kind of, that's too simple, right? Something like that. The first one sounds gravitas, more important, more big academic, right? Self-important. I know. The first one is extremely arrogant. In a way, it's an extremely arrogant way of putting things. We all agree it's the same statement, right? It's the same content. You are already spoiled. You're already spoiled by thinking, well, the second one is, that's too easy. You all want to belong to a secret society. I'm putting you on the spot, right? You all want to belong to a secret society, something that only communicates with the complicated sentences like number one, because you want to distance yourself from the uneducated masses, right? Something like that, right? See something. I'm a great guy. I'm a famous researcher. I can understand sentence one. I can even write sentence one. And only those who have my intellectual standing are worthwhile to understand my thoughts. Only they have the honor of passing what I want to say, right? Sounds arrogant, doesn't it? It is. It's extremely arrogant. It's extremely elitistic, exclusionary. Put whatever adjective you like there, and it also doesn't help. I think you said the second one is faster, right? It's faster to pass. So you're actually doing yourself a disservice if you write in the first style. It might sound more important, but it takes longer for the reader. It also has one line more, right? It takes longer for the reader. It is slower to pass. You convey less information per minute to your audience. And that's what counts at the end of the day. How much of your thoughts can you transport in the mind of your audience? So while I agree this sounds important, it's not a possible thing. And we'll talk about more examples here and how we get from something like that, which I admit, I do the same thing. Also, I start writing. If I'm not being careful, if I'm not paying attention, I've been in academia for too long. I also write stuff like that. It almost is second nature at some point. And then I look at this and say, oh my God, what did I do here? And then I need to go from this to that. It's a deliberate step. It's an effort to write simple, and that's terrible. But such is life, right? At some point you get spoiled.
In scientific papers, so in research papers that gets published, so we pass the papers, when we write papers, we pass them on to reviewers. Mm-hmm. But the current state of review, don't they just usually like the first style of writing?
Why do you think so?
Because every research paper that I've read writes with the first.
Because they are all trained monkeys who have no sense of taste and style, and they all imitate each other. Science is structurally conservative. I agree with that. So, I think that was also your reaction, right? This is not what I read. The second one is not what I read. I read weird stuff like the first one. Therefore, the first one should be right. It must be right. Because everybody does it. But that's exactly the reason. Everybody does it. So if everybody jumps from a bridge, you're jumping from the bridge too, right? That's not a compelling argument. That's not the argument. This is bad style, irrespective of whether everybody does it. Everybody does it because everybody does it. Because you imitate other people, right? You imitate what you read, subconsciously or consciously. It's hard to avoid. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to point out the problem. I'm not saying I have a cure. I'm trying to point out the problem and make you aware of these problems. And then maybe you can start looking at your own prose and reconsider. Okay? So that's the entire objective here. Actually, if you look back, this is an old problem. There's a couple examples. 1582, totally unintelligible, totally if use and custom, having the help of so long time and continuance, wherein to refine our blah, 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 blah. I dare you to read this in less than 5 minutes and understand what this guy is trying to say. This is completely obscure. Even then, people had better styles. Thomas Paine, one of the co-writers of the Declaration of Independence, the American Declaration of Independence, he wrote something like that. In the following pages, I offer nothing more than simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense. That's clear, right? You know what's coming up. Here? I mean, please. Impossible. I'll give you one more example. That's one of my favorite examples. Such preparation. Okay, context, Second World War, America, United States, the US had just entered the war against Germany and Japan. And it was not clear how this was all going to work out. Then the American federal government issued this as a public statement. Such preparation shall be made as will completely obscure all federal and non-federal buildings occupied by the federal government during an air raid for any period of time from visibility by reason of internal or external illumination. Such obscuration may be obtained either by blackout construction or by termination of the illumination.
Turning off the lights.
What the heck does this say? What the heck is that saying?
Turn off the lights.
Turn off the light, or
Turn on the lights.
termination of the illumination, right? This is turn off the lights, right? Blackout construction. Such obscuration shall be obtained either by blackout construction. What's a blackout construction? You know, air raid, bomber, airplanes flying over your city, looking for bright spots to drop a bomb on. Turn off the light.
Turning off the electricity.
No,
Blackout.
no.
No windows or something. Construct in a way that there is no inlet or something, no windows or something.
Nothing, no light comes out of the window, right? You hang something in front of the window for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Right? So it takes you some time to decipher, and you're not even sure what it means, right? In an air raid with bombs flying on top of your head, this causes death. This kills people. Then President Franklin Roosevelt also thought so when he saw that and proposed another way of putting that. Tell them that in buildings where they have to keep the work going, to put something over the windows. And in buildings where they can let the work stop for a while, turn out the lights. More people will survive with version 2 than with version 1. At some point, it boils down to human life, right? Now, I'm not saying that your seminar text will immediately have consequences how many people will die, right? Let's be realistic, but still, this is a good example. This saves lives compared to that. But I'm sure, I can vividly imagine the bureaucrat, the little small bureaucrat who came up with this formulation, reading this and going, but this doesn't sound important, right? Can you see the guy sitting at his desk and looking at this text and yeah, okay, maybe people will survive, but so what? That doesn't matter. It needs to sound important, right? No, it doesn't.
It's contract English. It's contract.
Contract English. So there's more examples for that. You got examples. There's plenty of examples for that. Let's skip that. So translation, more examples here. Also very nice for the German speaker here, Jürgen Habermas, one of the famous German post-war philosophers, perhaps the most famous one. If you read that, you look at that and it's impossible to translate, I'm sorry. But you look at this and says, huh? What the heck is he saying? And a famous Austrian philosopher, Karl Popper, also had the same idea and looked at that and what the heck is this saying? Basically came up with sort of a translation of that. And basically, you need to understand German. This is impossible to translate. You get the idea, right? Basically what you do, you take the left text and you look at it carefully, and then you take a needle and you make, and it goes, there's no content. There's effectively no content hidden behind lots and lots of syllables, right? It just shrivels down. But the emperor is not wearing clothes. The emperor here is not wearing words, but it is wearing words. Okay, why do people write like that? why would you write like the first understanding of the causal relationships of soccer fans, drinking, blah, blah, blah? Why do people write like this?
I wouldn't write like that, but I have read
Plenty of things. So, okay, let's speculate. Why did these people write like that? Clearly such text exists. You've all seen examples, right? Why?
maybe to make it sound more important or
More important, right? I'm a great researcher. I can write complicated. My thoughts are so deep and so challenging. It needs complex language to express that. Hence, I'm an important researcher, right? Something like that. The argument goes something like that. Okay, that's one and a very important reason. Also, everybody else writes like that. If I don't write like that, I get my paper rejected, I get passed over for a promotion, I don't get tenure, blah, 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 right? I need to fit into the pattern. What else? Two very important reasons for doing that. Yes, but there's a couple more. Well, not all of us are English native speakers, right? For many of us, English is a second language. If you're not in your native language, you actually are typically not so sure about wording, formulation, idiomatic phrases. The temptation to imitate what you see is so much bigger. In your native language, that is usually not such a big deal, such a big problem. You recognize much more easily what's going on. German, whatever, right? So the fact that this guy is writing in German is no compliment to him. So foreign language is a problem. And then you fall back to patterns that you've seen and think, okay, it can't be wrong. Actually, if you read scientific text currently, this is not English anymore. This is sort of Chinese English and Indian English and German English and I don't know, South African English. This is a little stir through the part. This is sort of not totally unlike English, but also not really English. So, and time limits. Often you write texts under time pressure, right? I usually do. I never have time to do that. So you start writing, you don't pay attention, you subconsciously, you fall into patterns, and then you look at this and say, oh God, okay, this is terrible. I wish I had another half day to go over it, but I don't, so okay, I send off the terrible version. Right? You need to revise texts. Very few people are able to write nice prose spot on. So the story I usually tell here at this point is, in the past I had a number of PhD students. I had two of them that were total ends on a spectrum. One guy was actually the only person I know so far who could write the perfect prose spot on. He wrote each sentence in the perfect ultimate shape. He never had to revise or edit anything. But it took him like 5 minutes for every sentence. So he sat in front of his computer and thought about it for 5 minutes. And then he typed in the sentence, and that was it. He could have used a stone and a chisel and chiseled it into stone. That would have worked for this guy. But sitting next to him and trying to work with him was pure agony. Come on, write something, please. No, slowly, slow down. But I admit it was perfect, right? It was great. On the other end of the spectrum, actually, a colleague of this guy in the same project, they had to work together, and you can imagine how this would work out. He was the total opposite. You discuss something with him, we discussed, we agreed, okay, this is the paper, this goes here, this goes there, this is our line of argument, this is what we want to say, blah, 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 and then he goes away and says, yeah, okay, great, I'll do a draft. And 2 hours later, I had a draft on my table, and I looked at this and, what's this? What's the topic? Egyptian pyramids? It was completely unintelligible. It was completely unreadable. It was completely obscure, unclear. I did not understand the text we designed 2 hours earlier. So I basically took sort of a roller with red ink and whoop, rolled over it with red ink and gave it back, right? And then you okay, and iterate and revise and revise and revise. Every revision was very fast. 2 to 3 hours, I had a completely revised version of the entire text. But that was only a marginal improvement each time, right? So, ends on a spectrum. There's no perfect way of doing that. The point is you need to know how you work. Right? Recognize yourself. You need to know where you fall, and there's of course space in between, right? But you need to know how you work. Why? Because you need that to plan your work style. Right? You need to figure in enough time for revisions, or you need to leave enough time to do your drafts. Nothing wrong there. Everything works, but you need to know how to organize your own work. Right? And that's why a seminar is also very important. It's one more piece of practice for that. To get to know your own working style and your own strengths and weaknesses. So how many bigger texts have you written? You probably all had a bachelor thesis, right? No?
No bachelor thesis.
No thesis, just coursework?
We had project.
Okay, project meant what?
It was like research project. Which we did.
And you produced something at the end?
Yeah.
So that was just code or also text?
It had both.
Okay. And your text was what? Documentation of the code or
It was a report, yeah.
a report? How long? 2 pages? 20? 200?
No, sir, it was around 100.
100 pages. Oh, okay. Oh, that's good enough. Individually or was that group work?
Group work. It was.
So each of you wrote what? 5 pages?
It was a group work, so maybe it depends.
It depends. Some wrote 0 pages and some wrote 80, right? Yeah. Okay, I can imagine. Yeah. You need to write texts. It's important. That's what you're going to do in your job. Whatever you do as academic or in industry or wherever, you need to be able to write text. And it's like riding a bicycle. This is not rocket science. This is not the secret art, but you need to practice. You need to practice, practice, practice. And again, this is nothing you learn from listening to lectures. If I can give you a lecture for 2 hours how to ride a bicycle, and you will still fall off, right? There's nothing there. You need to do it yourself. That's the only way to learn. Okay, so revising. Purely understood texts, trying to impress or confuse. Maybe it's not even impressing, it's just confusing, because you know your argument isn't good, or because secretly you know, and this result isn't so great. So let's smother it with complex language. Let's smother it with obscure wording, so the reader doesn't notice that actually, take a needle and it goes. So let's hide behind language. Also, a common problem. Okay, right, and foreign language. Foreign language doesn't make life any easier for that. So, speaking of foreign language, I guess you all know English reasonably well, right? Otherwise you wouldn't have passed the TOEFL or whatever, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So I assume that all of you know how to write correct English. Grammatically correct English, idiomatically correct English is already quite a bit more of a challenge. But let's assume that this is all in place. So let's be a bit quicker here. So what does correct English mean in the first place? What is correct English as opposed to incorrect English?
American English versus English.
Okay, American English versus British English. Both are correct versions of English, right?
Well,
I dare you to explain to an American that American English is not correct, but only British English is correct, or vice versa. That's going to be an interesting discussion. So there's a couple of versions of correct English, right? There's not the single correct version of English. But some of them are sort of more correct. More correct is a weird term than others. For example, he don't have no money. Is that correct English?
Maybe in New York.
Exactly. It depends on context. So this is not correct English as referred to by American Standard English, ASE, British Standard English, would also not recognize that as correct English. Why not? There's at least 2 problems with that.
Grammar and...
Well, there's 2 grammar problems with that sentence. If you cast it into American or British Standard English. Double negation.
And doesn't.
And don't versus doesn't. He doesn't have any money, right? Would be typical Standard English for that. You all recognize that, right? Actually, this is standard. This is a grammatically correct English. However, not American Standard English. I don't remember what the correct term is, This is a correct version of English spoken in the southern parts of the United States. It depends on context. It depends where you are. Don't write this in a scientific publication. That you get slapped around the face, right? Don't do that. By the way, you all have German classes, right?
Yeah.
How would you? Nah, you also had some at some point. How would you say this in German? Correct version. A grammatically correct version of this sentence in German. No. Hat kein Geld. Okay, let's do a southern dialect version. Hat kein Geld net. Koi is dialect for kein. Net is nicht dialect for net. I'm a southern boy, right? I'm from down south. So actually, Southern German has similar patterns to that. It also has double negation and also the inversion of the negation particles. So this happens in many languages, right? That you have sort of diverting versions. Negation is a typical thing where you can see something like that. Right, so clearly something like that is of course bollocks, right? This is nonsense. In no version of English, something, the book is the on table, yeah, this is just random words, but not the same. This depends on context, this is always wrong. And then you got things that are weird. Split infinitive is such a typical rule. You know that, right? Don't split infinitives. Typical thing that people teach about when they start to teach about important technical writing, right? Thou shalt never split an infinitive. What's a split infinitive? Give me a famous example of a split infinitive. The infinitive in English is a two-particle construction, is the actual verb, the stem of the word, verb plus to. To go, to run, to speak, to listen, blah, blah, blah. That's the infinitive, right? Splitting the infinitive means what? It means taking this, splitting it apart and stuffing something in between, right? That's a split infinitive in English. Famous example? No, that's just an adjective. Where's the verb there? You need a verb. To verb. To go, to run, to speak, to listen, to shout, to yell, to sleep, to whatever, right? That's the infinitive. What? Star Trek? Enterprise? You remember that? Okay, you're too young for that. That's probably the most famous split infinitive. What do? They go into space. And how do they go into space? Timidly, afraid? No. They go boldly. To boldly go where no one has gone before. Right? That title phrase. To boldly go where no one has gone before. That's your split infinitive, right? It's clearly pop culture. How could you reword that? To go boldly where no one has gone before doesn't roll off the tongue. Boldly to go where no one has gone before doesn't work either. Split infinitive is a totally weird thing. This is a grammar rule, quote unquote, that popped up out of nowhere, sort of second half 18th century, because English grammarians wanted English to be more like Latin. Back at the time, 1750, 1780, Latin was the rigor was famous, and if you wanted to read, I know you spoke Latin. So the English was squeezed into Latin grammar patterns, and that just made no sense. So screw it, forget it, doesn't matter. Split your infinitives. To boldly go. Nothing else. Doesn't really matter. If you read some old-fashioned books on technical writing, you mentioned you had such a class, right? Yeah. What did they use? Strunk and White? It's a typical textbook for that.
No, it was an American book. I don't remember.
Which is an American book, Strunk and White. But anyway, that's one of these 1960s style technical writing books. They will whip you if you dare to split an infinitive. Forget that. This makes no sense. Other things, relative pronouns, that versus which. You remember the difference? a restrictive relative clause and a non-restrictive relative clause. Dig back down into your grammar back in high school. There was something. The one is a restrictive relative clause you cannot remove from the sentence without losing information. A non-restrictive just adds additional things, but it's still clear what you're talking about. Forget the details. And then you find rules about, well, the one should be with that, and the other with which. And that's okay, except for the German-speaking guys. Why? The comma. The comma is a temptation there. And if you look at German relative clauses, you have das, right? And there's a comma. There's the unstoppable urge for a German speaker to put a comma there. And that urge translates into English, with that taking the place of the German das, and there goes a comma. And it's wrong. It's totally wrong. It actually distorts meaning of the English sentence to put a comma there. I never want to see a comma in front of that for you.
Always write it first and then delete it.
Delete commas. Actually, the rule for commas in English is, you need to remember one rule for commas in English, which is, when in doubt, leave it out. Most commas in English you can skip. There's very few which actually are necessary. There are lots that are optional, but many you can just. Okay. Right. In any case, I don't want to do a grammar class here. This is not the point here. But for German native speakers, originally I designed these slides for German native speakers. That's an incredibly strong temptation to do that. Right. Boldly go. We had that. Yes. To end the preposition, end the sentence with a preposition. Also something. Don't end. I'm sure you've been taught that. Don't end a sentence with a preposition. Right. Famous example. The peculiarities of the legal English are often used as a stick to beat the official with. Right? With is the preposition at the end. Dangling preposition. B word, please. Move the preposition into the middle of the sentence. You end up with something. The peculiarities of legal English are often used as a stick with which to be the official. Something like that. Gets a sort of another relative clause construction into the game. Doesn't make the sentence any easier. Famous example, Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister during the Second World War, right? Supposedly the man who won the Second World War, highly contested. But it's not contested that he was a very famous orator, a brilliant speechwriter, and brilliant speaker publicly. And at some point somebody accused him of having ended a sentence with a preposition and scolded him, Mr. Churchill, a gentleman of your level, you shouldn't have made such a mistake, right? His answer was, this is the sort of nonsense up with which I will not put. Right? Complicated structure, teasing the guy who claimed that he made a mistake. How would you say that normally? This is the sort of nonsense with which I will not put up. With which, well, something like this, yes. With which I will not put up. With which I will not put up with. Up with which I will not. You see, it's in fact, you get confused there. Anyway, something like that. Up with which I will not put. Okay, the men I spoke with were the men I had written to, right? Two dangling prepositions. Here, dangling at the first part of the sentence. Here, I had written to. If you want to reword that formally, the man with whom I spoke was the man to whom I had written. Right? Doesn't make it any easier, specifically in spoken language. Yeah, not in any. So lots of other things there. Non-native speakers often fall into traps of false friends, similar sounding words. Typical problem is effect on effect. What's the difference?
Noun and verb.
Noun and verb, exactly. Don't confuse that. Principle and principle.
The manager and the principle, like your ideas. Yeah.
Also a noun. You cannot use principle, the PLE version. You cannot use that as an adjective. It doesn't work in English, it doesn't exist as an adjective. You can do principle, either the headmaster or principle as an adjective. That also works. Imply and infer, different directions of the logical argument. Something implies something, you infer something, etc., etc. Yeah, and so on. What I strongly suggest, if you are here in doubt for some things, use one language, single language dictionaries. Usually much, much better than two language dictionaries. Specifically, leo.org or something like that, I would be very careful about that. Single language dictionaries, there's basically three well-known ones. Well, two are there, right? Oxford Advanced.
Westminster.
Hmm?
Westminster.
Westminster, okay, I don't know that, but sounds plausible. Merriam-Webster from the US, and American Heritage. That would be sort of the candidates I would look at. Personally, I like American Heritage. It's a bit more conservative than Merriam-Webster. Merriam-Webster is very permissive. It basically allows you to do everything, and then it basically means nothing anymore. American Heritage does a good job of being reasonably conservative in language development, but also they're doing a very good job of explaining connotations, differences in meaning between similar words or between synonyms. Well, yes, these are synonyms, but okay, look here, this version 1 is used like that and version 2 is used like that. Actually, my favorite one, do we have it here? No. If you get the printed version, it's like this. Something to kill somebody with. Okay, and then of course, basic rules, right? Number agreement. Number agreement is such a sore spot. And the rule is totally simple, right? English conjugation tells you the number of the predicate and the number of the subject need to agree. If you have a plural subject, you need a plural predicate. If you have a singular subject, you need a singular predicate, right? Peter is a boy, but dogs are animals. Totally trivial, right? Anytime I tell you, okay, this sentence has an error, spot the error, you will all find it. But when you write it, it's often a different story. I know many people who speak perfectly fluent and perfectly fine English, but when writing, they overlook that. Specifically the third person singular, right? The cheeky little s at the end of an English predicate in the third person singular. Easy to overlook, totally irritating when to read. Typical thing for revision. Forget it when you write it, don't bother. But when you revise, read it. So, how do you do that? How do you revise your own text? Nothing is harder than that.
So you write it, leave it for like 3-4 days, and then you come back.
Typically, you need to distance yourself by time, ideally by time. Comes back to work planning, right? You need to account for this time that you need sort of to let the text cool off, so you can look at it with fresh eyes and not think, oh yeah, I know what's written there. This is all correct. No, it isn't. If you want to proofread your own text, you need distance to the text. I had one conversation at some point with a guy who taught drawing. You know, sketches, drawing, etc. And one thing he typically told his students is, okay, when you copy a picture, say of a hand or something, turn it upside down. So you don't mentally recognize that this is a hand and then superimpose your own mental image of what this hand looks like. No, you turn it upside down so your visual cortex has no pattern, and then you actually start copying correctly, closely to that, closely to the original. It would be great if you could do this with text, right? But literally turning your text upside down, of course, doesn't work. But that's sort of the idea. You need distance. You need to break any preconceptions. And the strongest preconception is, this is my text. I wrote this. I know it's correct. No, you don't. There are mistakes. I don't know anybody who writes perfect text, except one guy, right? So you need that. Right, okay. Pronouns, etc., etc. Yeah, singular nouns that are singular in grammar but plural in meaning, also typical source spot. I'm just listing some examples, right? This is no exclusive list. So the committee, that's many people, right? But is it the committee has met or the committee have met?
Committee has.
I would also say has here, right? But the faculty have the memo. but not all of them have read it? Or is it the faculty has the memo? But then the second part makes no sense, right? So here, this is something where you would think of it as the body of people, each of them individually forming a group, right? And then it's a plural meaning. Even though grammatically it's singular, the faculty have the memo. But not all of them have read it. Whereas in the first case, you think of the committee as a whole. It's one single thing, one single entity, and then it, of course, takes singular, has, and its.
We can rewrite it as the faculty has the memo, but not all the members.
That's also an option, right? So lots of options there. Just watch out for such things, right? Typical thing is also versus the with number. A number of students versus the number of students. Right? The number of students is just the number, 5, 10, 15. It's not the students, right? So it's the number, takes a singular predicate. A number of students is 5 or 10 students sitting there, right? So it takes a plural object to the grading. So this is a grammatically plural subject. Right, gender indication, right? The problem that English has no gender neutral pronouns. Also, again, mostly a problem for the German native speakers, but this also spills over into other languages. When you talk about the server, the machine, the network, blah, 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 right? And you don't want to repeat that and use a pronoun. Which pronoun do you use? It, exactly. German guys very much tend to do er, he, because the German preponderance to gender, der server is male, so it's he. I don't know, die Maschine, it's she. And that makes no sense in English whatsoever, right? The English language has no notion of gender there. It's it. So please, it. No commas and it. Good. I guess I should collect examples from your own languages, how that spills over into grammatical problems in English. That would be interesting. For German, I know plenty of examples. But I don't know, Arabic into English, what analogies there are, I don't know. Or probably more problems than analogies. I'm sure there are some. For every language, there's stuff like that. Okay, and so on and so forth, right? So far, so good? Again, just a little reminder, you all had that in your English classes, I'm damn sure. Let's go to something a bit more down to the core of the problem. Let's look again at an example. Please read this. Once upon a time, as a walk through the woods was taking place on the part of Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf's jump out from behind a tree occurred, causing her fright. You recognize the story?
Yeah.
Is this how you would tell it to a little kid?
No.
Say a 4-year-old, right? Want to tell a good night story. Would you tell it like this? Well, if you want him or her to become a lawyer, really? How would you tell this story if you talk to a 4-year-old?
The Red Riding Hood was walking through the woods, and the wolf jumped and scared her.
Something like that. What's the difference? So I got this rewording. Once upon a time, Little Red Riding Hood was walking through the woods when the wolf jumped out from behind a tree and frightened her. Right? Same story again. In both versions of the sentence. Same story. Exactly the same thing happens. I guess we agree that this is more suitable for a 4-year-old than this one. Right? Except lawyer. Why? What's the difference? What's grammatically speaking the difference between these two sentences?
That's
sort of the effect. But what's the cause that the second one is more clear than the first one?
It's not direct. It's in It's not third person, but
Course of action. What actions? Actions is a good keyword. What actions are taking place in our little one-sentence story here? What's happening? What is going on here? What are the actions?
Walking and jumping.
Walking, jumping, right? That's the three things that happen. Exactly. And who is doing that?
That's not particular.
What?
I mean,
the wolf and the
Come on. Who are the acting personas? Who do you have to cast if you want to do a movie? Red Riding Hood
and the wolf.
and the wolf, right? That's your two personas. Who is doing what?
jumping. What goes?
Who is?
Getting tight.
Okay, from context.
Yeah.
Do you think the wolf is afraid of Little Red Riding Hood? Probably not, right?
But for a kid to find the
Causing her fright. The wolf's jump out from behind a tree occurred, causing her fright. It's pretty clear. The jump causes fright. So in this sense, you are actually correct. It's not the wolf that frightens her; it's the jump that caused fright. Right? If you are really picky with the first sentence. So we identified our two actors that we have to cast: Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf. Director tells walk, jump, frighten. Okay? We are clear on that. We all agree, right? Characters and actions. You know, your director calls action. Okay? How does this boil down to this sentence? Well, your characters are. Well, this is shifted, sorry. This should point to Little Red Riding Hood and wolf. Right? In the sentence down there, okay. Now look at the grammatical structure. The subjects of your first sentence are a walk and jump. Those are the subjects. In the sentence below, how does that work out? What are the subjects in this second version? Subject, predicate, object. So what's the subject in this here? Once upon a time is a time adverbial. Doesn't matter. Little Red Riding Hood was walking through the woods. The woods jumped out from behind the tree.
The characters are the subjects.
The characters are the subjects. The characters are the same, right? We have still Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf. We didn't fire our actors. But they are also the grammatical subjects. Right? Rule number 1. Use your characters of your story as your grammatical subjects. Right? Rather than, what are your subjects? A walk and a jump. I don't know how to cast, who to hire to play a walk. I don't know, that makes no sense, right? So this is weird. Use your characters as subjects. The flip side of that, coin are the actions, right? So, what are the predicates? The predicates in a sentence tell you what's going on, right? What are the predicates in this sentence here? And again, what are the predicates down here? We already agreed what the actions are, right? So let's now look for the grammar. What does the grammar tell us? What are the predicates up here?
Was
Taking place, to take place, is one predicate. What else? Causing. And there's a third one. We need 3 actions, we need 3 predicates.
jumps.
Occur?
No, occur. Occur is your third predicate. Take place, occur, cause. If I tell you that the story will be about take place, occur, and cause, you can see the movies right in front of your eyes, right? Absolutely. It's totally clear what's going to happen. It's absolutely obvious. Second version, walking, jump, frighten. Okay, maybe it's still not totally vivid, but if I tell you the movie is about walking, jumping, and scaring, that's a bit more flesh to the bone, right, than occurring, taking place, and causing. And again, we have the same story as above, right? The predicates and the actions are not matched here, whereas in the second version, your predicates are your actions, right? Second main rule, use your actions as predicates. The simplest rule at all, the simplest two rules at all, but it constantly gets violated. The versions you liked earlier violated both rules. If you flip back, this played merry havoc on these rules. Okay? And we agreed, this is easier to pass than that one. Right? This is what you read to your 4-old little niece, nephew, whatever. Maybe son or daughter, I don't know. So far so good? Excellent. Let's make an exercise. Not quite as trivial as Little Red Riding Hood. That's a bit more involved. Please rephrase this sentence such that we get our characters as the subjects and our actions as the predicates. Think about this. So what's going on here? By the way, Federalists, if you're unfamiliar with the term, Federalist is a political movement in the United States. Sort of a libertarian part of the Republican Party, roughly speaking. Not strictly, but something like that. So it doesn't really matter so much. So, who are the acting parties? Who are our characters? One is the Federalists. The Federalists, this group of this political movement, these guys who claim to be Federalists, they do something. What do they do? The Federalists destabilize. No.
The response to the destabilization.
They argue. The Federalists argue, right? Right? British Parliament, order. So, Federalists argue. Okay, what else? Who else is doing what?
The factions.
Yeah, and what do they do?
Are distancing their self-interest.
They're doing what?
They are furthering their self-interest at the expense of.
They further. Factions further. Exactly. Factions further something, namely their self-interest. Okay? And one more thing. It's quite hidden actually, but there's one more actor that does something.
Democracy destabilizes the government?
Democracy destabilizes, exactly. Deeply hidden here in the destabilization and bipopular, so we got a nominalization plus a passive construction, right? But it's the democracy destabilizes government. Right? And there we are. That's our three actors and their three actions. Federalists argue, democracy destabilizes, and factions further their self-interest. Okay? Sentence, please. Maybe it's a good thing to start with here. Federalists argued. Okay, that's easy, right? I give you the easy one. No. They argue what? Yeah, that in regard to, maybe we need to kick this thing out. So Federalists argue that something's happening, right? They argue that. They argue what? Subject. We need a subject. Which subject? You have now two options, and both are correct. You can work with both of them.
So
You can
factions?
now continue with popular democracy or with factions.
That the faction's tendency to further. What exactly do they mean by further here? Is it like
To
just
further is to improve, to increase, to foster.
Yeah.
By the way, we have one more action that we overlooked, believe. They believe something. So Federalists argue and believe. Democracy destabilizes and actions and factions foster. Okay? I now need to put this somehow together. How about something like this? Federalists argued, or we don't know. Federalists argue that popular democracy destabilizes government. Takes care of these first two lines. Right? Federalists argue that popular democracy destabilizes government. Full stop. Take a breath. They believe that this was caused, they believe that this is caused by factions tending to further their self-interest at the expense of the common good. Something like that. Still not nice. This self-interest at the expense of the common good, that's also a problem, right? This is also not nice, but maybe something like this. So what do I have here? Federalists argued that popular democracy destabilized government. That's easy, clear, to the point, clear story. And then we need to, was based on their belief, we need to get rid of this. Because they, Federalists, they believe that factions tended to further their self-interest at the expense of the common good. Something like that. Still not a nice sentence, right? Still yucky. But again, we started with something that was terrible, and now it's just yucky, so still it's probably a slight improvement. You probably want to do some major surgery on something like that and get rid of the entire construction and toss it out completely and rewrite totally. Never be afraid of drastic steps, right? When you're revising, kick out 3 sentences in a row. It doesn't matter. Nobody's going to look at it in any case, right? So, make sense? Maybe it's one more smaller example. How about this? Our lack of data prevented evaluation of United Nations actions in targeting funds to areas most in need of assistance. And the color scheme is already there, right? Don't be afraid of drastic steps. No need to stick to this closely or anything.
Is targeting here a negative or a positive thing?
To target funds, you get your money and put it there. I target it towards you. Money goes towards you. This is positive.
So the evaluation of UN actions to direct funds to areas in need of assistance was prevented by the lack of data. Somehow.
I would be more drastic. What about evaluation? Isn't there an action hiding there? What are the actions? Again, what are the actions? What's going on? What's the movie all about?
Targeting and evaluating.
Targeting, evaluating. Evaluate is a verb, right? You evaluate something. You look at it and you think about it. What else?
Prevention.
Action.
Prevention.
Prevent. Something prevent something and
Your action.
actions, yeah, and
Assistant.
to need assistance, needing something, to need assistance, to need help. There's a lot of stuff going on in this sentence, right? All deeply hidden and deeply obscured, right? I would do a complete rewrite for that. I would probably start with something. Because we lack data, actions, character. Our lack of data. No, we lacked data. We lacked data to evaluate what the UN did to target funds. Because we lacked data, we could not evaluate how the UN targeted funds to areas that needed assistance. Something like that. What have I written down? Because we lacked data, we could not evaluate, again, we got the predicate here, that matches the action, whether the UN had targeted funds to areas that most needed assistance. Right? Typical nominalization style here, right? Typically pulling evaluate into evaluation. Targeting, okay, yeah, here, lack. Also, the counterpart is you nominalize the action, turn that into your subject. It makes your subjects, your characters disappear. Right? Our lack of data. We. This is typical when you're going to write your thesis and your experiment didn't work. Our lack of successfully running simulations prevented from producing results. Who's to blame? You are. I am. Come on, own up. Own up if it doesn't work, but also own up if it does work. Because my program worked splendidly. The program I wrote worked nice. I did this. I ran the experiment. I ran the experiment on the weekend. This nominalization style, if you read this in your scientific prose, the people disappear. You wouldn't believe how many labs run over the weekend by magic. There's nobody there doing any experiments, nobody is writing code, nobody is doing experiments, nobody does anything. This all happens magically. We'll probably next week, but this is this sort of objective neutral case, right? You remove characters, and then you end up with some stuff like that. Okay. So here we are hiding what's going on, the actual action in a nominalization. A similar thing happens when you push this into adjectives. Not as big a problem, but also still a problem. Typical phrasing, the data are indicative of the problem. No. The data indicates the problem. That's your verb, not are. If you got to be or to have as your predicate, something is for sure wrong. There's almost surely a problem. The data indicate the problem. Is applicable, is dependent, is deserving. Applies, depends, deserves. Is dependent is just the means of slapping in 2 more syllables into a text that is much happier with depends. And that's a common pattern. You'll see that. I challenge you to produce me a text in your first draft that has no is dependent inside. I bet you won't make it. Prove me wrong. Right? Challenge accepted? No is dependent. It's easy to reword, it's nicer, it's more vivid, it's so much better in all possible senses. We'll see. Okay. How are we doing? Tired? One more example? One more example. There is opposition among many voters to nuclear power plants based on a belief of their threat to human health. Short example, actually. Again, who are the actions? What are the actions? Who are the characters?
Opposition.
Is what?
Action.
An action. So the action is, the verb is Opposition is not a verb. An action is a verb.
Oppose.
Oppose, exactly. To oppose. Okay? What else? What else is happening there? Believe. To believe. And there's one more thing.
Threat.
Threat. To threat. Oppose, believe, threat. Who is doing that? Voters. Is one character. What else?
Yeah.
Power plants. By the way, who is this there? There refers to
Power plants.
the power plants, right? If you think this refers to voters, voters threatening public health, voters threatening human health, maybe not, right? But power plants makes more sense from the context, right? So, excellent, please give me a nice sounding version of that sentence. With voters and power plants opposing and believing and threatening.
Voters oppose the nuclear power plants.
Mm-hmm.
Because they believe that nuclear power plants threat human health.
Threaten
Human health.
threaten human health. Yeah, exactly. That's actually plain and simple here. What do I have? Many voters oppose nuclear power plants because they believe that such plants, I don't want to repeat that, threaten human health. It has the charm of making the cause-effect relation explicit. Right? Because I explicitly say this is the reason. Here I kind of have to guess, right? I kind of have to guess that there's sort of cause-effect, based on, it's kind of there, but because it's the clear, straightforward word. Okay, so if you want to look at that, well, you need to notice it first. You need to diagnose. You need to diagnose your own prose or prose of your friend when you're doing a proofreading for the thesis, whatever. You need to diagnose, you analyze, you revise. Common patterns. Nominalization as a subject. Right? We've seen many examples. The intention of the committee is to audit the records. No. The intention of the committee?
The committee intends.
The committee intends. The committee intends. You see the guy sitting there in the meeting room intending something. The intention of the committee is verb. Is means nothing. Is a bad verb. There are constructions. There is no need. There are no need. There is no need for our further study of this problem. We almost entirely drop the character. There's a very weak hint to who is doing something here.
Us.
Our. Right. We. We do not need to study this problem further. Right? Study. B seems has the result. Also, all such shilly-shallying evasion phrases that just make it weak. Unspecific verbs. Conducted an investigation. For crying out loud, what does it mean to conduct an investigation? You investigate. Exactly. You investigate. Conduct an agent. 5 superfluous syllables. But just blow up your sentence. And for one sentence is not a problem, but if you do this to every sentence, you stuff in 5 additional syllables, your text doubles.
This is what we used to do to reach page limits in undergrad.
I know, and I'm telling you that this is wrong. That's why I'm not saying page limits, neither minimum nor maximum, as short as possible. You know, in some technical writing classes at a British university, I've seen an excellent exercise. Give students a job to write something. Tell them 20 pages maximum. Guess what? How long is the text going to be? 19.5 to 19.8 pages, right? And then you tell them, excellent, good job. Now the same content in 15 pages. You end up with 14.8 pages on average, right? And then you tell them in 10 pages, in 5 pages, right? And all of this fluff goes away. All this hot air streams out, and you end up with text that is actually real. Right? No minimum text, as short as possible. I don't want to read stuff like that. Nobody wants to read stuff like that. Right? You don't want to read stuff like that. I guarantee you. Once you start reading your buddy's texts, you don't want to read stuff like that. You'll take out the red ink and upend it onto the text. Actually, the worst critics I've seen for texts of students are other students. I am nowhere near as mean as students can be to each other. I've seen comments from students to students where I thought, oh boy, oh my God, I would not have dared to write that. This is harsh. Well, so be it. Okay, and so on and so forth. So there's plenty more examples for such revisions, for hidden text, etc., etc. But I think that we've picked that bird to the bone. I think. Any questions up to here? Make sense? Maybe let that sink in. Also, my voice is about to give up, so I think I should stop here. Think about that. Practice. When you read text, how do you practice? When you read your papers, look at that. Try to diagnose. See whether you detect these patterns. Nominalization. There are. Empty words. Conduct an investigation. See if you detect stuff like that. I bet you any amount of money, almost any amount of money, in every paper you'll see 5 examples. 5 sentences where you could see, okay, wrong. Bad style. Just sharpen your eye. Just read with a critical eye and see whether this appears. And that will already help when you start writing your own stuff. Because then when you revise and proofread your own text, that will help a lot. Excuse me. Okay, guys. So far, so good. Makes sense? So there's one more thing we need to cover in this context, and that is how do we lift from a sentence to a paragraph. But that's a longer discussion. We'll do that next time. Next time would be, I think at some point we said Friday, 4 o'clock or something, right? I remember some discussion about that. No? Am I dreaming? I'm imagining. Okay, the way you look, I'm imagining things. That's okay.
Friday is a holiday.
Yeah, not this Friday. I meant Friday in general. Of course not this
Friday 6 to 8, I remember.
Yeah, but that was also just once. Right?
Just once, but you told me we discussed.
It kind of worked, but so does Tuesday, 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Do we need to? Yeah, I guess we need to do the 6 o'clock thing, right? With your language classes and so on. But okay, the plan would be we do one more meeting on paragraphs. Cohesion, coherence are the catchphrases for that. That's actually important. That differentiates then a well-written text, an easy-to-read text from some text. And then we are more or less done with this first part. And then once we are closer to summer, we'll do maybe just one more meeting on presentation. How to do slides, how to present, how to give a talk. So we're talking 2 more meetings, right? And again, I emphasize again, this is voluntary, and I'm recording this, so up to you whether you're going to come or not. So next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday is the deadline.
Could finish early before the deadline. Totally revolutionary approach, right? I don't care. Wednesday doesn't work for me. Thursday is okay.
Yeah, 4 days off before the deadline, so I think it's enough time.
Yeah, I would think so too. But so let's see. Thursday is also good. Thursday is 6 o'clock. So we go through all the days of the week at the end, right? We had a Tuesday, a Friday, then a Thursday, and then we need a Monday, right? And then we all... Thursday? Thursday, 6 o'clock. Thursday, 25th of April. Okay. Okay. Beschlossen und verkündet.
Where would be the meeting?
Here. Okay, guys. I guess that's it from my side for today. Any final remark, questions, comments, ideas? Then I wish you happy holidays.